The dead weight label my husband threw at me in front of hundreds of people became my sharpest weapon. He did not know that dead weight can also be a millstone, the kind that sinks an entire proud ship. He had no idea that the woman he dismissed was the one holding the stone. And I was about to let it drop. My name is Alara. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom at the Four Seasons Austin were shining directly on me. But I felt naked and cold. Marcus Thorne, my husband, the CEO of Auraverse Solutions, was standing on the victor's podium, champagne flute in hand, smiling at his investors. He had just finished his speech about vision and sacrifice, and when someone asked about my role in his success, he laughed. It was a laugh I once loved, now sharp as a razor. "Ilara," he said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the silent room. "She's my lovely dead weight. Keeps the house warm, watches the kids." A necessary luxury, I suppose, but dead weight all the same. The room chuckled. It was not a malicious laugh, but the polite, agreeable laughter of the elite, which was somehow worse than contempt. I felt the blood drain from my face. My chest tightened, as if squeezed by a vice. I saw the quick smirk from Serena Vance, his COO, who stood just off stage. It was a look of collusion, a triumphant purse of the lips. I had spent 15 years of my life building his network, hosting his perfect dinner parties, editing his speeches, sacrificing my own law career so he could soar. I did not cry. I did not run. I just stood there, my own wine glass perfectly steady, and stared directly into his eyes. He shrugged, as if it were a harmless joke, but I saw the truth in his gaze. He actually believed it. He had forgotten that I was the one who found the loophole in his first contract, the one that saved him millions of dollars. That night, I did not say a word on the drive home. The silence in the Bentley was heavier than the soft jazz playing. Marcus, already drunk, tried to take my hand. "You know I was just kidding, baby," he mumbled. I pulled my hand away. His skin felt disgusting. When we got to our multi-million-dollar mansion, he passed out immediately, snoring loudly. I stood in the master marble bathroom, staring into the mirror. The 42-year-old woman looking back at me looked tired, but her eyes did not. They were burning. "Dead weight," I whispered to my reflection. "All right, you'll show him the true weight of dead weight." I went back to the bedroom. Marcus's phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text message lit up the lock screen. "Great talk, but the dead weight part was the best. Waiting for you at our place tomorrow. S. Serena." Of course. The humiliation solidified into something cold and sharp. This revenge was not just about emotional betrayal. It was about taking back everything he had taken from me, piece by piece. That night, Alara, the dead weight, died. Alara, the strategist, was reborn. I went downstairs to his office, where I knew he kept a backup laptop. He was always so proud of how smart he was for backing everything up. He had no idea I was the one who set that system up, and I knew every single password. I began to live 2 separate lives. By day, I was Alara, the perfect hostess wife. I still picked out Marcus's ties, smiled at his partners, and planned the next charity gala. I became invisible, a piece of the furniture, exactly as he had described me. The more he ignored me, the more space I had to work. At night, his office became my command center. I installed a sophisticated keylogger program, something I had learned from a boring cybersecurity course I once took onto his laptop. I needed more than just romantic texts. I needed the weapons that could bring him down completely. I started monitoring Auraverse's financial transactions. Marcus had given me read-only access to several company accounts years ago as a way to make you feel involved. He had forgotten to revoke it. I noticed enormous payments, coded as R&D consulting fees, being routed to a shell corporation in Delaware. I hired a private investigator, an ex-cop named Frank who specialized in financial crimes. I paid him with the money I had been secretly saving from my household allowance for years. Money Marcus assumed I spent at Neiman Marcus. I directed Frank to investigate that shell company. A week later, Frank called back. Mrs. Thorne. His voice was gravelly over the encrypted line. That company, Apex Innovations. It has no office, no employees, but it does have a single listed owner. He paused. Serena Vance. My heart hammered. This was not just an affair. This was embezzlement. Marcus and Serena were gutting Auraverse, the very company he claimed was his baby. They were stealing from their investors. I needed irrefutable proof. I bought a micro recorder, the most expensive one I could find. That night, while Marcus was in the shower, I sewed it into the lining of the Italian leather briefcase I had given him for our anniversary. An act of intimacy turned into an act of war. A few days later, I downloaded the audio. I sat in my car in the Whole Foods parking lot, headphones pressed tight, and my world shattered for the second time. I heard Marcus and Serena. They were not just talking about love. They were laughing about their investors. Those idiots, Marcus said. They think we're building the future. We're building our own exit. Serena laughed. The Odyssey project is just smoke and mirrors. When we announce it at the shareholders meeting, the stock will spike. That is when we sell off our shares, drain Apex, and disappear in Portugal. They were planning a massive pump and dump scheme using the upcoming shareholders meeting as the bait. The shaking started in my stomach and spread through my entire body. I was not just betrayed by a cheating husband. I was married to a criminal. My revenge was no longer about a broken heart. It was about justice. I knew I could not do this alone. I needed allies, but I could not trust anyone in our social circle. They were all tied to Marcus's success. I remembered Lydia Hayes, the former chief financial officer of Auraverse. Lydia was a sharp woman who had been forced out by Marcus and Serena about a year ago after she asked too many questions about expenditures. I contacted Lydia using a burner phone and an encrypted email address. We met at a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop on the edge of Austin. Lydia looked older, more tired, but the fire in her eyes was still there when I said, "I have proof that Marcus and Serena are embezzling funds." At first, Lydia was skeptical, but when I played the audio recording, her face went white, then flushed with pure rage. "That son of a bitch!" she hissed. "He ruined my reputation to cover this. I want him to pay." I had my first ally. Lydia became my inside woman. She still had contact with a couple of low-level accountants at Auraverse who were loyal to her. They began to secretly copy server logs, internal wire transfers, and send them to me through a secure channel Lydia set up. I started to build my case. I opened a safe deposit box at a different bank under my maiden name, storing hard copies of everything: the audio transcriptions, the shell company's bank statements, the internal emails. I backed up everything onto an encrypted hard drive that I hid inside an old book on contract law. Marcus, completely unaware, grew cockier. He and Serena became more blatant, frequently working late together. He even told me he was proud that I had accepted my place and was no longer making trouble. His arrogance was his own blindness. I started a riskier move. I created a fake profile on an underground financial forum, posing as a disgruntled Auraverse employee. I began to leak small, anonymous pieces of information, not enough to cause a full-blown alarm, but enough to get the attention of one person. My target was a well-known investigative journalist named Julian Vance, an ironic coincidence of a last name, but no relation to Serena. Julian was famous for never letting a story go. I sent him an anonymous tip. "Look into the consulting fees at Auraverse. Something smells very rotten." Julian started digging. I monitored his online activity. He was asking the right questions. The bait was set. The machine of destruction had begun to turn, and Marcus was still busy planning his trip to Portugal. I felt a cold fever of power. This was not impulsive revenge. This was a precise surgical operation. I was dismantling his empire, one screw at a time, right in front of his face. Julian Vance published his first article. It was not a bombshell, it was a probing jab. Questions raised over opaque spending at tech star Auraverse. The piece did not have names, not yet. It only mentioned minor irregularities, statistical anomalies in the research and development budget, but it was enough to rattle the market. Auraverse stock dropped 3% in a single day. Marcus came home that evening like a hurricane. He did not just walk in, he exploded through the front door. He threw his leather briefcase, the one still dutifully recording, across the foyer, shattering a priceless crystal vase on the console table. "Some bastard is leaking!" he roared, not to me, but to the empty air of the mansion. I just stood there, holding a cup of tea, my heart hammering against my ribs, careful to keep my expression neutral. He wheeled on me, his eyes narrowed to slits. "Did you talk to anyone? Any of your stupid, vapid friends?" I made myself tremble slightly, widening my eyes. I just shook my head, feigning fear and confusion. "Marcus, you are scaring me. I do not even understand what that article is about. Opaque spending." His contempt for me saved me. He let out a harsh laugh. "Right, of course you do not. You probably cannot even define opaque. Stupid, dead weight." He turned his back on me, the dismissal complete, already dialing Serena's number. I listened, silent, as he ordered the company's cybersecurity division to scour every server and find the rat who was trying to sabotage him. The hunt began immediately. Lydia sent me a frantic, encrypted message. "They are locking down access. My people are being cut off. We have to move faster. Marcus is trying to accelerate the merger talks. He wants to sell the company before this blows up." Serena, sharper and more paranoid than Marcus, was getting suspicious. The next audio file I retrieved sent an absolute chill down my spine. "Marcus." Her voice was cold, calculating. "Do you think this could be coming from inside the house? Alara is too quiet. She took that dead weight comment too well. It is unnatural." Marcus brushed it off, his arrogance insulating him. "She is not smart enough for that. She does not have the spine. She is busy planning some damn flower party for the governor." But I knew the seed of doubt had been planted. I realized I was being followed. A black SUV, nondescript but menacing, started appearing parked down the street from our house. It was there when I went to the supermarket. It was there when I picked up dry cleaning. Marcus had hired his own private investigator to watch me. He was not looking for a leak. He was looking for dirt. He was trying to find proof of an affair, or any instability, anything to use against me in a divorce to paint me as an unfit mother and leave me with nothing, just in case the worst happened. Real fear, cold and sharp, crept in for the first time. I was not just exposing a white-collar crime. I was playing a dangerous game with people who were cornered, and they would not hesitate to destroy me completely to save themselves. I had to finish this, and I had to finish it quickly. I contacted Julian Vance one more time. This time, I gave him a bigger piece of evidence, a partially redacted bank statement from Apex Innovations, showing a massive incoming wire transfer. I told him, the annual shareholders meeting, that is where it is all going to happen. Marcus turned cruel. He cut off my credit cards. "For security reasons," he said, his smile a tight, false thing. "The company is under attack. We have to tighten everything up." He was trying to isolate me, to make me a prisoner in my own home, completely dependent on his cash. The black SUV was a permanent fixture now, a constant reminder that I was being watched. I could not meet Lydia or Frank. All our communication had to be through encrypted channels, and I could only use them at 3 a.m, when Marcus was passed out in a drunken, stressed-out sleep. Julian Vance published his second article. This one hit harder. Delaware shell company linked to Auraverse executives. Stock plummeted 15%. The investors were not just rattled, they were panicking. The calls for an internal investigation began. Marcus was like a caged animal. The air in our house was thick with his suppressed rage. He stopped yelling. He became quiet, calculating, which was far more terrifying. He would just stare at me across the dinner table, his eyes trying to drill through my calm facade. "You seem unnaturally calm, Ilara," he said one night, his voice silky smooth. Through all this chaos, I put my fork down, letting my hand shake just a little. "What would you like me to do, Panic? You always told me to let you handle the business." That night, I woke up with a jolt. He was standing at the foot of my bed, just watching me in the darkness. My heart stopped. I forced myself to feign sleep, to keep my breathing even, while every nerve in my body screamed. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, then turned and left the room. I knew he suspected. He had no proof, but his animal instinct smelled danger. The next day, I found my personal office, my hobby room, had been searched. He had gone through my desk. I was prepared for this, leaving only the harmless things: party planning notebooks, fashion magazines, gardening shears. The encrypted hard drive was safe in the bank vault. Lydia's message came through. Frantic. "They found my guy in accounting. He's been fired. Security is sweeping the entire building. This is our last chance. Ilara, you have to leak everything now, or we lose it all." I realized Marcus would never let me leave with anything if he could help it. He would destroy me first. The shareholders' meeting was no longer a strategic choice. It was my only way out. I contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission. Using a private lawyer paid for with the last of my emergency fund, I officially filed a whistleblower complaint, providing the entire package of evidence. My lawyer confirmed it. They are interested. They are moving. But they need a public event to make the arrest stick. They need to catch them in the act. The Auraverse annual shareholders meeting was set for 72 hours later at the Austin Convention Center. This was not just a meeting. Marcus and Serena were planning to use it to announce their fake Odyssey project, inflate the stock one last time, and then vanish. Marcus, in a desperate attempt to project normalcy, demanded I attend. "You have to be there, Ilara. We need to show a united front." He gripped my arm, his fingernails digging into my skin. "You will sit in the front row, and you will smile like the proud wife." It was not an invitation. It was a command, a threat. I agreed, my smile as fragile as spun glass. Of course, Marcus. I would not be anywhere else. He had no idea that my presence was exactly what I needed. I was planning the performance of a lifetime. I secretly met Lydia and Frank one last time. Frank had the final piece of the puzzle. He had discovered that Serena had booked 2 one-way tickets to Lisbon, Portugal, departing just 3 hours after the shareholders' meeting was scheduled to conclude. They had no intention of staying to answer questions. Lydia, through her old contacts, had managed to gain administrative access to the convention center's audio-visual system. "I have about a 30-second window," she said, her eyes gleaming. "When Marcus cues the video to start talking about Odyssey, I can hijack the main screen. You have to provide me with the file." I spent the entire night editing. I did not just have audio. I wove together the recordings: the deadweight insult, the plans for embezzlement, the cruel laughter about their investors with the hard financial documents, the bank statements from Apex, and the damning Lisbon flight itinerary. It was an irrefutable indictment, packaged just like one of their own corporate presentations. Marcus became almost manic, euphoric. He thought he was actually going to get away with it. He even bought me a new diamond necklace. "So you look gorgeous on the big day," he said, fastening it around my neck. I wore it. The cold weight of it felt like a shackle. I had already contacted my lawyer and the SEC. "Everything is ready," he confirmed. "The agents will be on site, in plain clothes. They will act the moment the evidence becomes public." The night before the meeting, I could not sleep. I stood by the window, looking out at the Austin city lights. This was the final gamble. Either I would take back my life, or I would be completely destroyed. There was no turning back. The convention center ballroom was packed. Hundreds of investors, analysts, and journalists were crammed inside. The air was electric with tension. everyone waiting for Marcus to address the rumors that had been swirling for weeks. I sat in the front row, just as commanded, the new diamond necklace glittering coldly under the spotlights, playing the role of the devoted, supportive wife to perfection. Marcus walked onto the stage, radiating a false, almost manic confidence. He launched into his speech, full of empty platitudes about resilience and overcoming challenges and the strength of the Auraverse vision. Serena sat nearby in the executive section, smiling proudly, a picture of corporate loyalty. He looked over at me, a brief, dismissive glance. I smiled back, a slow, steady smile that he, in his arrogance, did not recognize for the weapon it was. "And now," he said, his voice booming with forced excitement, "the moment you have all been waiting for, the future of Auraverse, is Odyssey." He signaled to the audiovisual technician in the back. That was Lydia's cue. The massive central screen flickered, but instead of the sleek, futuristic Odyssey logo, the face of Serena Vance appeared. It was a grainy security camera still, captured by Frank, of her at a private bank in the Cayman Islands. Beside the image, a wire transfer statement appeared, a transfer for $5 million. The room went utterly, deathly silent. Marcus froze, his triumphant smile evaporating. There has been a technical mix-up," he stammered, his voice suddenly small. Then, his own voice filled the auditorium. Not his live voice, but the voice from my tiny recorder. "Those idiots." The recording boomed. "They think we're building the future. We're building our own exit." The screen changed. It was no longer Serena's face. It was a series of spreadsheets. Bright red arrows, simple and brutal, showed the flow of money from Auraverse's research and development budget to Apex Innovations, and from Apex to a series of offshore accounts bearing the names Marcus Thorne and Serena Vance. Serena leaped to her feet, her face a mask of chalky white horror. Marcus was frantically waving his arms at the AV booth, shouting for them to cut the feed, but no one was responding. Lydia had locked the system. The final audio file played. It was from the night of the gala. His voice, slick with condescension. "Alara, she's my lovely dead weight." And then, Serena's purring reply, "Waiting for you at our place tomorrow." A collective, massive gasp erupted from the crowd. The financial scandal was bad enough, but the public, brazen exposure of the affair, of the raw contempt he held for his own wife, annihilated every last shred of his credibility. Marcus turned, his head snapping toward me, his gaze locking with mine across the stage. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, profound horror of realization. He looked from me to the giant screen, and finally, he understood. "You," he roared. It was not through the microphone, but his animalistic shout echoed through the stunned ballroom. "It was you!" He lunged off the stage, shoving aside stunned investors, his face purple with rage, trying to get to me. But he was too late. The main doors of the ballroom burst open. SEC. "Everybody stay in your seats." Federal agents, flanked by Austin police, flooded the room. Chaos erupted. 2 agents made straight for the stage, where Serena was trying to slip out a side exit. "Serena Vance, you are under arrest for securities fraud." 2 other agents intercepted Marcus just as he was feet away from me, tackling him to the ground. "Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest." As they hauled him up and cuffed his hands behind his back, he never stopped staring at me, his eyes promising a revenge he could no longer deliver. I stood up, calmly. I walked through the pandemonium, past the screaming journalists and flashing cameras. I stepped up onto the stage and walked to the podium that Marcus had just abandoned. I picked up the microphone. The room, a sea of chaos, instantly fell silent. Every eye turned to me. "My name is Alara Thorne," I said. My voice was clear and strong, amplified throughout the massive hall. "For 15 years, I have been the silent partner of Auraverse. I helped build this company from nothing. I looked down at Marcus, struggling against the agents. And today, I saved it. What you have just seen is the result of a 6-month investigation conducted by myself and my colleagues. I pointed to Lydia, who was standing at the back of the room next to another SEC agent, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. Lydia Hayes, your former CFO, who was fired for trying to stop this theft, will be cooperating with the SEC to lead a full forensic audit. We will get back every single dime. A journalist shouted from the front row. Mrs. Thorne, your husband called you dead weight. What do you say to that? I looked directly into the camera, the one I knew was broadcasting this live. I knew this moment would be replayed 1,000 times. Mr. Thorne was right about one thing, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. I am, indeed, a dead weight, so heavy, in fact, that I just sank his entire criminal empire. Any further questions can be directed to my lawyer. The following weeks were a legal cyclone. Auraverse immediately filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection to restructure. Marcus and Serena were indicted on a slew of federal charges. Portugal was no longer an option. Marcus, in a final, desperate attempt to drag me down with him, tried to claim I was a co-conspirator. He told the federal prosecutors that I knew everything and had helped him hide it, hoping to discredit me as a whistleblower and nullify my testimony. But he had underestimated me one last time. My record was spotless. My lawyer had documented every single contact I made with the SEC, with Lydia, and with Frank. And the final nail in his coffin was his own voice. The recording of him calling me his stupid dead weight proved to the court that he did not consider me an intellectual partner, let alone a criminal accomplice. His own words, his own arrogance, had destroyed his only defense. The bankruptcy court froze all of Marcus's assets, the mansion, the cars, the private accounts. But I was prepared for this. My lawyer filed a civil suit, not as a scorned wife seeking alimony, but as a defrauded business partner. I provided the evidence journals from the early days, emails I had written from my personal account, business plans I had drafted. I proved that the initial business strategy, the first round of investor contacts, and even the name Auraverse had all been my ideas. I was not asking for a divorce settlement. I was demanding my 50% stake in the company as its unrecognized co-founder, while Marcus sat in a federal holding cell, unable to make the astronomical bail. I and Lydia were already at work. We met with the new, court-appointed board of directors to restructure the company. The Odyssey project was immediately scrapped. We focused the company's remaining resources on its actual viable core technology. Serena Vance, facing 20 years in prison, took a plea deal. She agreed to testify against Marcus, admitting to every single charge in exchange for a reduced sentence. The news of the dead weight wife's revenge became a media sensation. I did not hide from it. I controlled the narrative. I granted one exclusive interview, and I did not speak of heartbreak. I spoke of strategy. I spoke of business ethics. I spoke of the value of overlooked partners. My email inbox was flooded. I received thousands of messages from women all over the country. Women who had also been called dead weight, who had sacrificed their careers, who had felt invisible. They called me a hero. But I knew the truth. I was not a hero. I was just a woman who had finally decided that she had endured enough. The court ordered Marcus's personal assets, including our mansion, to be liquidated to help repay the investors he had stolen from. He had truly, finally, lost everything. Marcus's sentencing day. I was there. I sat in the front row, not as his wife, but as a creditor, a victim of his federal fraud. He looked gaunt, shrunken, and suddenly old in the harsh orange of his prison jumpsuit. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 25 years. He would be an old man by the time he was released. As the marshals led him away, his hands cuffed, he looked at me. The anger was gone. The arrogance was gone. There was only a vast, hollow emptiness, the look of complete and utter failure. The court ruled on my civil suit. They recognized me as the unofficial co-founder and awarded me 40% of the restructured Auraverse, plus substantial damages. Lydia was appointed the new permanent CEO. I sold 3/4 of my shares immediately, walking away with a 9-figure sum. I had taken back everything he stole, and more. I stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by journalists. Julian Vance, the reporter who had helped start it all, was the first to get a question in. "Mrs. Thorne, what will you do now with all of this?" I looked straight into the camera. "First, my name is Alara Hayes. I have taken back my maiden name. Second, I am starting a venture capital fund, but my fund will only invest in companies founded by women, the kinds of women who have been called dead weight for far too long." Several months later, I visited Marcus in prison. This was the last time. I needed to do this for myself. He sat opposite me, behind the thick glass, the last of his pride gone. "Why?" he asked, his voice a dry rasp over the phone line. "Ilara, why destroy everything we had it all?" I picked up the receiver. "You had it all. Marcus, I was just an ornament you owned. You were wrong. I was not your dead weight. I was the foundation. And when the foundation decides to leave, the whole house collapses." I stood up, hanging up the phone. "And by the way, that diamond necklace," I said, mouthing the words through the glass. "Thank you. I sold it and donated the money to a shelter for abused women. It looks better there." I walked out of the prison, and the free air never tasted so clean. My car was waiting. I was not living in Austin anymore. I had bought a penthouse in New York. As the car drove away, I did not look back. I had my name back, my fortune back, and most importantly, I had my power back. He had called me dead weight. Now, he had nothing left to carry, and I was flying. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am curious, where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect, and please share your own thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us further by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by many more people.